Well, let's get into it. All right, guys. Today I got Steven Dorrick, LOJ conversions. He does basically just Nissan swaps of LSs at the moment.
Yeah, we're branching into some other stuff now, but for the most part, that's where we started.
That's where I met you. Was Jeremy had his 350Z, I think it was, or something like
370Z.
that. 370Z, yep. Whatever, a Z car at the time, and he was trying to he was LS swapping it and doing all kinds of stuff, and you were down helping him, and then you had a car at the shop that you were also working on, so I kind of got my feet wet seeing the Nissan swap stuff, and then I have your kit on my 240 as well.
Yep.
It's got the oil pan and motor mounts on it, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
And then trans mount probably too.
Yeah, because you wanted a 256 in that, right?
Yep, yeah, 256 Magnum in that car.
Yep.
So you kind of specialize in the Nissan swaps.
Yep.
And Nissan, they're kind of weird with this stuff. They don't change much, it seems
really
like.
It makes a lot of the swap stuff easier. Like they're kind of almost like Legos in that way. You know, they use the same architecture across a bunch of different platforms. And generationally it changes, obviously, but, you know, like 350Zs and G35s are the same as a few other cars around that time period. And 370s and G37s are the same, you know.
But even like 240s are weird, where like a diff from a 350Z can go into 240, and you're like, how does that cross over? How did they cross from the 90s to like 2008?
They made a design that worked, and they just really didn't change it, you know. And the Nissan diffs are pretty tough, but they've been using those R200 diffs all the way back to 84.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people go sevens drag racing on them, which is pretty kind of mind-blowing to see like this little tiny diff.
It really is. Yeah.
But I guess once you cut enough weight out of a car, you kind of kind of get lucky there.
Yeah, I've blown up a fair share of those R200s in heavier vehicles, I can tell you that much. So.
It's kind of nice to use the cheaper diff and then use the cheaper axles, because then you just leave the axles as that endless weak point.
Yeah.
Those are easy to replace.
Yeah, for sure.
Diffs are hard to find and hard to manage, I guess.
It is. They are. And the funny thing, though, is that you really got to find like factory Nissan axles. You don't want to run the aftermarket stuff because they're actually weaker.
But they're easy to replace.
They are.
You can just bring them to the parts store and endlessly swap them out, which I kind of like on the first time I took my 240 to the drag strip. It broke both axles on the first launch.
The first hit.
But they were like old. They were crusty axles, but it was kind of sad because it didn't even drive. Breaking one's nice.
Yeah.
You still drive.
It's welded diff, like Lincoln locked.
Yeah, it's just welded.
Yeah.
But what did I do? I think I had to actually weld the diff on that car, which is weird because it's got drift cage and everything.
Yeah.
To have to weld the diff on it, I was kind of surprised that was undone.
You did the cage in that car yourself, or you bought it that way?
It was like somebody used to drift it back in like 98.
Oh, okay.
And which is kind of cool because a lot of like old drift guys knew it.
Yeah.
Like Hurt was like, oh, I used to drift with that car. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Interesting because it's got a unique color. It's not.
Yeah.
Most people don't go with two-tone pewter and maroon.
Yeah.
So you specialize in LS swaps on Nissan chassis though, right? And that's probably 90% of your
95%, yeah. So it's kind of funny. Like I used to build swap cars like in my spare time for buddies. I'm going back 12, 15 years now. And it wasn't LSs. I'd put anything, SR20s, the Nissan V8s and stuff, whatever. And a guy I worked with at my day job was like, you do a really good job with this. Like, you should probably make these parts and sell them. He had his own business doing LS wiring harnesses. Mm-hmm. So I took his advice and I was like, you know what, I'll try. You know, I was young at the time and no kids at the time. I was like, sure, I'll start a business, you know. And I kind of looked at the landscape of vehicles. I knew that LSs were what people wanted for cheap power to go fast. You know, it's affordable. I don't think anybody in the aftermarket industry would argue dollar per horsepower. There's no better bang for your buck than an LS engine out there. And then I looked at platforms, and nobody made kits for the Z32 300ZX, which is like the 90 to 96 300. Mm-hmm. And the motors in those cars are like notoriously unreliable and expensive to fix. I mean, if they're built right, they work, but they're getting old, you know? So I was like, you know what, I'm going to pick that engine, that car, because if I'm the only guy making parts for it, then it's a sure way into the market because there's no other choice. So I kind of did that as a way to build the reputation of the business, entering a market that I hadn't been in before, and then branched out into other Nissan platforms. But I've been into Nissan since I was, 19 years old, 18 years old. So I've been doing them a long time.
What was the draw for the Nissan then?
it's like really the only rear-wheel drive import car. I mean, all the Hondas, I actually started out in Hondas as a teenager, but drag racing front-wheel drive cars was not really very much fun.
Still isn't.
That's for sure.
They know it's not fun.
Yeah.
Even the guys that are deep in it, they know it's not fun deep down.
I mean, I'm an engineer. I know I'm fighting physics. It's like, this is just not the way to go. So I bought a 240SX, an S13, an 89 coupe for $400 when I was like 17 years old because it had like an input shaft bearing noise in it. It's like, you can't find a 240 for that money. It's like,
that's unfair.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a $400 240 now.
I SR20 swapped it. I imported a motor from Australia, and like I had never done a motor swap before in my life, and like figured out the wiring, made it all work. Went like 13.7s in 1999, 2000. So,
So that was a hot rod.
Yeah, it was. For that time period, it was. You know,
Yeah.
I remember messing around with like shaker hood Mach 1 Mustangs on the street and all, and like leaving them.
I'm sure you spent a lot of time at the track, people coming up to you telling you got the wrong motor, you need displacement, rice burner, all that stuff that I hear currently from guys in their 60s that come up to me at the track.
Oh, come on. The JZ in that car's awesome. So
They still say it, though. They're like, you'd be a lot faster if you have more displacement. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, there is a rule. There is no replacement for displacement. Bigger cubes with boost will make more power than smaller cubes with boost. But JZs are awesome, and they make tons of power. And I think the straight six in such like a long nose car is kind of cool. Like it fits, and
It's definitely a long nose car. It's hard to get the engine out of there. You got the engine hoist all the way up against the bumper to get it.
That's true. I never even thought of that.
The SR is actually a really cool motor too, though. The more I've seen people kind of dive into it more and more, it seems like it's actually a cool engineered, well put together engine. And I think there's one in a Pro Mod making like 3,000 horsepower.
Yeah,
also.
they're crazy. Especially, I think they put the newer SR20 variable valve timing head on the older rear-wheel drive blocks and then make tons of power. I think Jay Meager up at Real Street built a ton of them. Like they go real fast. What's his name over at Mazworks? I think is down here in Florida too.
Yeah,
I forget his name, but he builds. I mean, that's all he does. It seems like his SR20s and sets crazy records. So, yeah.
People that are in the SR20 world seem to really love them because even like Adam LZ, I know he loves his SR20s and he's a 2J guy as well, but then keeps going back to the SR20. So to me, I'm like, oh, there must be something pretty special about that 4-cylinder.
Yeah. I mean, they make great power. I don't think they make as big a power as K-series stuff, but modern cylinder heads flow crazy air compared to older stuff from the 80s and 90s, so you got to kind of expect that.
But even the KAs are actually pretty cool, too.
Yeah.
They actually seem to have progressed pretty well, maybe just out of necessity because there isn't as many SRs, so they kind of had to progress the KAs.
Well, it's funny. I saw that in the 240s. Like a lot of guys, they'd have the KA, they'd swap them out for an SR, but then there was guys that ended up swapping back to the KA because parts availability was easier in the States. They're bigger displacement, and with boost, they actually make really good power. And the iron block was stronger than the SR aluminum block, so there was a lot of...
They're pretty compact, too, compared to the SR. They don't have that giant cylinder head. They're kind of like...
Yeah.
They fit a little bit better. The 300ZX is always a weird one because they're like that comfort, cool car, but then that engine just seems like such a nightmare.
I mean, they were built as a grand touring car more than like a sports car, and they definitely fit that profile. Like, but the first one I ever LS swapped was actually my wife's car. She really wanted a convertible. I bought her a Z32 convertible, automatic, non-turbo. All the convertibles were non-turbo. And I remember actually right after my first kid was born, going to Target to pick up diapers. And I came back into the parking lot, went to turn the key, and the fuel injector had, I guess, stuck wide open, which was very common for those side feed injectors, and hydrolocked the motor on fuel and bent the rod. And that's how LOJ was born. I was like, I'm going to put an LS in this thing. So I did. And I drove that car for 30,000 miles with the LS in it, like the first one I ever built. Just, I take the approach of the swap kits a little bit differently than a lot of other companies. Like, I have this mindset where I feel like it should be just as easy to swap a motor into the car if you have the right parts as it is to put the stock motor in a car, or easier. Like, this shouldn't be hard. So, like, I've tried to design every part you can for those cars to make it as plug and play as possible. And the 300 and the 350Z were really, like the pinnacle of my ultimate kits that include everything down to brake booster hoses and heater hoses. Like, it's everything you need to just bolt in a motor and go. And a lot of development went into that.
Well, there's kind of levels of swap as well on an LS swap. Like, the kind of level 1 is like a stock ECU, as many factory parts as possible, factory trans, that kind of thing. And then there's like the take everything out, make it race car type of swap.
Exactly.
But there's something nice about like a factory feeling swap, not like it's a race car and acts like a race car.
Absolutely. Like the G35 that I built and developed a kit for, that car's still running around down in Hawaii now. I think it got shipped down there, but I drove it a ton of miles. But that, like with that car for the 350s and the G35s, the kit lets you use your stock Nissan power steering pump, alternator, AC compressor on the LS motor about in their stock location, so all your factory hoses work.
Yeah.
You use the stock Nissan trans. You reuse a lot of the Nissan parts, and then with CAN bus integration now, all the factory gauges work, air conditioning works, cruise control works, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, I try to make it as if you didn't know and you got in that car and you turned the key, like it's got a bit of a rumble to it and it goes a heck of a lot better than the V6 did, but it feels and runs and drives like a factory car.
Yeah, I think that's very important on a swap, especially on like non-race car stuff, because I have swaps that are race car swaps and they kind of suck. They have their downfalls because nothing really integrates super well, and like kind of have to engineer everything yourself almost, and that kind of makes it a little less of an enjoyable car.
But I mean, for a race car, it's a race car, so like it's okay making those concessions, you know. But for a car that you want to drive on the street, daily drive, whatever, like my fun weekend car is a 2009 M35 that's got an LS7 in it, and I put a 6L90 behind it, made the factory shifter work with it, so the tap shift still works. All of that, and I take my wife and kids to get ice cream in that car. Like it's, you know, it's quiet exhaust. I put factory 5th gen Camaro mufflers on it with the dual mode. So when you bump the shifter to sport mode, it opens the exhaust and gets louder. And when you go back to drive, it's quiet. Like, and I don't know. A lot of guys build race cars, and building race cars is difficult in a lot of ways and easier in a lot of ways too. But making a real true street vehicle that drives like factory can be a challenge, especially with a swap.
For sure, and I think I got actually rid of 2 cars because I didn't think that they were going to go that route where they were going to be true street cars but swapped.
Right.
And that was my Supra, and I had that black 240.
Okay.
And the black 240, I hoped it could be maybe like a swapped 240, but also still like a good street car, and it wasn't going to ever be because it was it already had missing too many pieces to be worth making it like that. And then the Supra, I didn't feel kind of was right for a 1,000 horsepower engine. It kind of was like
that was was it a 90?
MK3.
A 90 or an 89?
It was an 89.
89?
Yeah. And, you know, it was like one of those deals where, it would be cool with 1,200 horsepower, but it's like, what do you even do with a 1,200 horsepower street car at this point? Because I'd prefer to drag race anyways. So you kind of get into that point where you want like a true swapped street car, and then your choices become a little more limited. You have to start with something that has everything also.
Yeah. It's funny because that's how my Frontier of all things started out, was like a swapped like badass street truck. And it has evolved way past that in the last 3 years, which we could talk tons about. But it was build something cool that I can drive in the street with a ton of power. It was an all-wheel drive twin turbo LS and a Frontier, like 1,000 horsepower and manual trans and cool and fun to drive. Still had air conditioning, cruise control, all that stuff, and it worked. And then all of a sudden I got out on a racetrack and it was like, this is really fun. I want to go faster. And then you start making those concessions between what's a real street vehicle versus a race vehicle. And it's got tags and registration and I drive it on the street, but you know, with the sequential gearbox and stuff like that. And now it's
not quite the same.
Not quite the same. And I do miss the H-pattern box in that regard, like driving it in the street, but on the track, the sequential is just freaking awesome.
Yeah. So. And you're talking like a track, not a drag strip.
Yes. Like I road raced.
A lot of our viewers may think different track.
I know that, like a lot of your guys, like your whole background, even back in the day with Cletus and all, was like a lot of drag racing.
Yeah.
You know, all that. And I started there. I did a lot of drag racing. And then, 3 years ago, was it 21? I had my Frontier at LS Fest, and I ran the autocross. And I didn't even know that like LS Fest and the Optima Ultimate Streetcar Challenge were run by the same marketing company, FM3 Marketing. And then at LS Fest or Mo Party or Ford Fest, the FM3 crew picks one vehicle that they think like represents the ultimate street car, and they give them a Spirit of the Event award, which gets them an invitation out to SEMA to race with the Optima Ultimate Streetcar Challenge at SEMA. And when I went to LS Fest, I ran the truck, I packed up my stuff and went home. I had the booth for like my company and all. I didn't even know that award exists. Like a month before SEMA, I got a phone call. Do you know you won this Spirit of the Event award? And I was like, what is the Spirit of the Event award?
Yeah.
They explained it to me that you want to come to SEMA. I was like, can I call my wife and ask her? And she's like, well, we need to know today. I was like, I'll talk to my wife. I'll call you right back. She said, you got to go. It's an opportunity. And like literally that year was the first time I had ever been on a road course racetrack in my life. Like we went to SEMA, we did some stuff in the parking lot at SEMA, and then we went out to Las Vegas Motor Speedway, went out on the road course. Never did it before in my life. Thought it was awesome. I was like, I need to do this more. And, you know, drag racing is a lot of fun. Like I've gone fast. I went, you know, low nines or mid nines, naturally aspirated, LS swap 300 ZX, and had a lot of fun with it. But it was like a lot of waiting for not a lot of time on track. You know, somebody oils down a track and it can ruin your whole night. And honestly, I've been doing it for years, so I wanted to try something new anyway. And I'd autocrossed for years also, like at local autocrosses. And once I got on the road course, man, 2021, I did that event at SEMA. I was like, I need to do more of this. We spent the whole winter doing like more safety, bigger brakes, stuff to make the truck like reasonably safe on a road course.
Yeah. What's the weight on that truck?
With me in it, 4,800 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Figured it'd be lighter than that for a two-door short bed truck.
It's a beast.
Yeah.
And all the Frontiers are heavy.
Yeah.
Factory weight's like 45.
I guess that's why you don't see as many Frontiers as you see like Tacomas.
Yeah. Well, we're working on changing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I ran 2022 in the Ultimate Streetcar Challenge. I decided to actually run events. I ended up winning the points championship in the truck class in 2022 by 2 points. So I got the regular season championship, and then went back to SEMA, runner-up at SEMA, and then last year did it again, won the points championship, and won at SEMA last year. So like the truck is working, and it's crazy because I built LOJ as like an engine swap company, but now I've had a bunch of people reaching out about handling stuff for Frontiers because they're figuring out like it works. Mm-hmm. So we developed a axle flip kit, lowering kit this year that we just released. We're building 3 more Frontiers for customers right now.
And that's a solid axle truck, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So my truck is an IRS.
Okay.
Nissan, again, we were talking before with like their like Legos, like stuff just fit.
Mm-hmm.
So like, believe it or not, a Frontier, Pathfinder, Xterra, Armada, Titan, the frame is the same on them all, which is one of the reasons the Frontiers are so heavy, because the frame's beefy. Now, like,
it's not a true truck then at that point, right? It's
a body on frame truck.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize all those cars were body on frame then.
Yeah, they're all body on frame.
I figured they'd be unibodies.
No, they are the newer ones. Like the new Pathfinder it's basically like a lifted Maxima now. But
That's
back
what I
in the
kinda
day,
figured.
back in the day, it was a truck. It was an actual truck.
Yeah, it seems like everybody's going to like a truck.
Yeah,
When
like the
it's
Mavericks
unibody.
and all the
If it's unibody, I don't know if it's a truck.
It's not really a truck.
But that's interesting. So, I mean, that truck obviously well decorated at this point. What's the engine combo in it? Is it?
It's a 6-liter L77 out of a Caprice, stock crank, forged rods and pistons, Texas Speed ported stock heads, twin turbo setup. I run a Haltech Elite 2500 on it. It's got a set of Borg Warner turbos on it. Mm-hmm. And we're actually in the process of changing the whole combo for this year. I'm building an LSA now for it. Engine, I'm still staying turbo, but I bought an LSA block because they've got the stronger alloy block, the better heads, the piston oil squirters, better stuff like that. And I've got an actual aftermarket forged crank rods and pistons for that. Staying 6.2. Turbos and strokers don't really work well in like road course situations for a bunch of reasons that we don't have to get into. But
taking 100 pounds off would be nice as well.
Yeah. And well, it's still the L77 is an aluminum block too.
Oh, is
it's
it?
the Caprice engine. So
See, those always throw me off. There's so many freaking engine codes for the GM stuff that for a while I tried to keep up with it, and then I'm just like,
I mentioned it. I mean, we're in it every day.
You have to know.
Yeah, I know. I can spit off engine codes, till I'm blue in the face because like every day I've got customers.
Called the GM dealer, and you know every code for every every part number and everything.
Like, I know this part I need. Well, what's your VIN? No, just sell me the part. I know what I need.
There's too many. There's too many for the GM, and then the debate becomes: is it even an LS anymore, or is it an LQ?
It's a Gen 3 small block. Okay, can we call it that? Gen 3, Gen 4. So. But yeah, that truck, and it had a T56, well, TR6060 out of a Camaro SS or ZR1. I forget which it was. Whichever one has the cooler for like the track pack on it. And I had basically had a Corvette main shaft put in the Camaro transmission, and they put a Corvette tail housing on it because Corvettes are transaxle. And that gave me a flat flange that I can make an adapter to put a transfer case behind it. And the like base model C6 Vets were 27 spline, just like a 4L60. So the Trailblazer transfer case slid right on, and I just needed an adapter. So that's how I made the truck all-wheel drive originally. And I ran...
I think, just so people know, we brushed over that a little quick. It is all-wheel drive, LS swapped, Nissan Titan, or Frontier with a sequential transmission.
Now
and
is,
IRS.
Yes. And IRS.
It's kind of a basket case.
It is.
I mean, hear all that and then also to say it's in a truck is pretty interesting.
Well, that's the funniest thing, because part of the Optima streetcar challenge, one of the things that you have to do is they call it design and engineering judging, and they give you 4 minutes to present your vehicle to these judges, and it's like, how do I even begin to describe what this truck is in 4 minutes?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, but
I know, that's why I had to slow you down to explain like exactly the level of crazy that we're talking about here, because each one of those things by itself is also interesting, and then to kind of throw them all together, that's why that truck's always been so cool. And then the turbo setup making like all kinds of cool turbo noises, of course, and especially sequential makes it just...
The sequential was new for last year. That was, so I ran that.
What sequential is it?
It's a PPG gear set in a TR6060 case.
Got it.
So it's the same setup that they run like in those 3,000 horsepower standing mile Vipers and all. Basically, I ran that 27 spline setup, never broke it, but needed to make more power, and knew that 27 spline main shaft would potentially be a weak link with how heavy the truck is. It's on 345 tires square, so there's a lot of rubber on it, under it, and a lot of grip, a lot of weight, a lot of power. You break stuff. So I never broke it, but I wanted to upgrade. And I forget the guy's name, but you know the Postal Jeep?
Yeah.
With the LS Swap Postal Jeep? That guy owns a shop. He had bought one of the all-wheel drive setups from me for something he was building, and he figured out how to... He had the equipment for cutting the Trailblazer input gear out to 31 splines instead of 27. So we put the 31 spline main shaft in and the 31 spline gear in the Trailblazer case. And I ran that for all of 2022 racing, making about 900 wheel, and never broke that either. And then we turned the power up more right before SEMA in 2022. I went from 52 millimeter turbos to 57s, made more power. And then at the first race of last season at NOLA in Louisiana, broke the cluster gear in the transmission. So not the main shaft, but I guess the way a TR6060 works is like the input shaft, there's one gear on it that feeds the counter shaft to all the gears. If you break that gear, you lose everything other than fourth gear. So very last road course session of the day, fortunately I had finished all the other things I needed to and got a clean lap in for a lap time. But on my second or third lap, when I grabbed third gear, that gear just let go. So that's when I called Tick Performance, and they actually came on board to sponsor me. They rebuilt that trans for me. Then we towed the truck out to Laguna Seca, and I broke the trans again.
That's a trip.
Yeah, and that sucked.
Jersey to Laguna Seca.
It was a bucket list thing, man.
Yeah.
Like, Optima doesn't always run Laguna, and because Optima runs with the Trans Am series, there's no noise restriction, so my truck would not be able to run there otherwise.
Because normally you have to have mufflers out there or turn downs or weird kinds of... It's weird that they're allowed to...
The certain number of events per year by the town ordinance, they're allowed to be loud. So like they save those days for like Trans Am stuff. And because we race the same time Trans Am races, like between Trans Am races, we're out on track racing.
Okay.
So I was able to run out there, which was awesome. And literally... I was in first place in points to win the truck class at the event, and my out lap for my afternoon session is when it broke again. So I didn't get a clean lap time in, and I didn't win the event. I drove all the way across the country. That was tough. It was real tough. But that's racing, that's racing is like my most hated phrase that people say.
It's tough. It's a tough phrase to hear, especially when you're out there with broken parts. I mean, it's normal. I hear it all the time, and I have to say it all the time to myself normally. after the end of a race.
It happens drag racing, probably even more. Like, I like to think, like drag racing, you guys will build 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 horsepower combo. And I don't want to say it's easy to make 1,000 or 1,500 horsepower with an LS, but it kind of is. It's relatively easy. Like, there's so much info out there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
it just takes money.
Yeah.
It just costs money.
But there's a whole difference between making 1,000 or 1,500 horsepower to survive, 6, 7, 8 second drag passes a few times, or to survive a 20-minute lapping session at wide open throttle. Like, I basically had to rethink everything. That engine I put together was built for like about 1,000 horsepower. That's like a good combo for an LS as a forged rotating assembly and a stock crank, whatever. You can make that power for drag racing all day long. But when you get on a road course, that crankshaft starts twisting, bearings start getting chewed up. Like, so now the combo I'm building now, like that engine from who I've talked to would be like a good 2,000, 2,200 horsepower combo, but I'm still only going to make 1,000 with it because it's like on a road course, if it'll survive 2,000 horsepower for a drag racing application, it should survive 1,000, 1,200 on a road course for a reasonable amount of time.
The problem that us as drag racers get into is you keep hitting that up arrow every pass. You can like kind of, you set it and forget it almost a little bit.
Yeah.
And like once you kind of have your power number and your setup, you can kind of leave it. But drag racers, every time you come back around, you're like, I need a little more.
Well, I'm guilty too, man, because I hate to keep going back to the Optima thing, but like there's 5 different things we do. We do the design and engineering thing, the road course, but we also do autocross and we do a stop-start challenge, which is like a no-prep drag race.
Yeah.
Down around a cone and back, and then you have to stop in a stop box. And with the Hall Tech that I run on the truck, I've got a knob that I can basically just turn the power up. And if I'm like not running as fast as I want, like I'm totally guilty of cranking that knob up and maybe getting a little too spicy with stuff, which probably results in parts breaking. But
yeah, that ends up being the parts failure. I'm actually interested in the Optima stuff because I haven't heard really anything about it much. Okay. I've always been around it and seen it, and I never really like had any, I guess, venture to go over and watch it. I've been to both LS Fest and seen them doing it, and kind of LS Fest West, they do like a whole thing where the guys are like gone for like a whole day, kind of on their own thing. So I never really, I guess, understood what that whole challenge was.
So, I mean, if you want, I can.
Yeah, break it
down. I've
done
it now for a couple of years, so I know a little bit about it. But they basically, the Optima Ultimate Street Car Challenge, anybody can enter. You have to be a registered street car. You have to be the owner of the car to race it, and you can't be a professional racing driver. So, like,
what's a professional racing?
Like, if you're paid to race by a racing team, you automatically get kicked into what they call the outlaw class, which is like race prepped cars. You can download like the rule book off of Optima's website for like the tech stuff that you have to pass. But basically, then they break the cars down into classes. There's vintage car class, a truck class, a sports car class, which would be like Vets and Vipers, a GT car class, which would be like 4-door sports cars like BMW M3 sedans, or one guy runs a Chevy SS in that class that's real fast. And then at an event, the field's limited to 100 cars of all types. And we will all compete together. We'll all do the autocross. We'll all do the stop-start challenge. We'll all go out on the road course. We all get judged by the D&E judges. And the fastest car at any one of those things is first place. You get 100 points. The slowest car gets 1 point, and everybody in between. So, like, there can be 10 trucks that show up at an event out of 100 cars. And if I am the fastest vehicle overall at the stop-start challenge and the next fastest truck is the 20th fastest, I get 20 more points than they do.
Oh, interesting.
Because we're all graded on the same score.
Yeah.
So you don't just want to be the fastest in your class. You want to be the fastest overall to get points. And then whoever has the most points, you can get 100 points at one of those 5 things. A perfect score would be 500 points. Nobody's ever done it. One guy got like 499 last year at one event.
It's like bowling.
Yeah. But, basically there's 6, 7, 8 races a year, depending on the season. You only have to run 2 events for the points championship, and they take your highest score from any 2 events, add them together, and that's your season score. And then whoever has the highest season score wins for the year. If you win any one event, you get invited to SEMA to race at SEMA in front of the whole crowd there, which is pretty wild.
How many events do they do a year then?
6 or 7 regular season events. This year's 7.
Yeah.
Sebring's this weekend. It's the first event. I don't try to run every event. I don't go out to the West Coast. Last year I did Laguna because it was a bucket list thing, but normally like I'll do Road America. They do VIR, Virginia International Raceway. I mean, I'm from Jersey, if you guys don't know, so Northeast. But we had all these plans to upgrade my truck and didn't even get started on it. So I was like, it's still working. We left SEMA with nothing broke. Sebring's in a couple of weeks. Let's go. So we kind of impromptu decided to come down here.
Yeah, it's a pretty good track and facility setup down there. So that'd probably be one of the ones I'd try to hit too.
And I've never been. Great. They did Daytona last year under the lights at night, which was probably wild. I did not do that. Something about like wide open throttle around that bank turn in that truck at that power level I think they ran Daytona in July.
It's a scary bank when you're actually there.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's steep.
We did Charlotte 2 years ago, which was what they call it the Roval. It's like the road course plus the oval. And that bank's nothing compared to Daytona. And even that was like pucker factor because it's concrete walls everywhere. Like you lose it, like you're going into a wall. And you're total in your car.
Do you follow the Trans Am series for those two then?
We do, yeah.
Okay. So that's what Kevin KSR races in the Viper that he has.
Okay.
Yeah,
he'll probably be there this weekend then.
I don't know if they do all of them, but he does Trans Am series with a Viper with one of his customers.
Okay.
And he's like, I don't know if he drives it at all or how that.
I've talked to Kevin a few times. He actually tuned a car for me years ago. It was on a Dominator. But yeah, I mean, I'll walk around the pit, see if I see him. That'd be cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool Viper they have set up for it. And there's so many little things in that rule set as well that just go right over my head. Once they start adding a book of rules to me, I'm starting to get lost a little bit.
That's the nice thing with the Optima thing is they have a novice class too. So if you've never done it, like they send the novices out on the road course together alone without everybody else. So it's less pressure. And honestly, like Jimmy and his crew that run the event and the other competitors, I've done a lot of different kinds of racing. They're all so friendly and helpful. Like it's a nice series to participate in. Like I'll bring my wife and kids to the track, hang out in the pits. Like it's a good family atmosphere. And the barrier of entry is pretty low. Like you look at like the cost of entering a Grid Life event or a Global Time Attack event, like Optima is way cheaper and you get a lot of seat time. They do like the episodes are on TV on CBS Sports. So like there's exposure there. Like it's pretty cool to get into.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never really ventured much into it. I've only just seen the trailers at LS Fest of the big Optima trailer.
Yep.
That's kind of my
Optimus Prime, or they call it Optima Prime, I think they call it.
Yeah. But yeah, I've only been around it at LS Fest, and then normally there's a billion things going on, and it's impossible to try to focus on one thing.
Yeah, for sure.
You're pulled in 50 different directions, especially now at the burnout contests and stuff too.
Yeah.
But it's always a fun event. So with your swaps, have you ventured into the LT stuff at all?
We do.
Is that kind of the next venture? Because
we have LT kits for 350Zs and 370Zs, and the biggest nut to crack on the LTs are the oil pans. I got to be honest with you. Like the way that GM like integrated the oil pump pickup into the pan makes fabricating swap pans challenging. The engine management, Holley's got answers for the direct injection now. Haltech's releasing something this year from what I hear for the direct injection. You can tune the factory ECUs now. So like from the tunability perspective, and the cool thing with the LTs too is they're still 58X. So you can delete the direct injection, put port injection on it and run it on a Gen 4 computer and it works. So
that's the best way to do it from what I've seen anyways.
Yeah, and those heads they flow so much better than a LS head. Like they make big power.
They clamp so much better too when you add boost to them.
Yep. And then we actually just this year released Hemi kits too.
Okay.
So I've had customers.
Gen 3 Hemi stuff.
Yeah. Which that's been a learning curve for me because, I've done LSs for years, but Hemis, a lot of stuff is the same between them, but like Hellcat is different. So like oil pans for Hellcats are different from Hemis, but the motor mounts are the same, trans adapters are the same. Engine management's a little different because a Hemi has 6 knock sensors on it.
There's so many spark plugs too.
Yeah.
I don't know why they need so many.
They got twice as many spark plugs, and their coils are dumb coils. They don't have igniters in them, so you have to run extra electronics to make the coils work. It's been a learning curve, but same thing.
They make good power though.
They do. The heads flow. They make good power. It's crazy with the factory tuning. Like Mopar basically rides the knock sensors on their timing curves on those. Like,
really?
Yeah. The ECU just throws timing at it constantly until it hears knock and dials back all the time. And they run way less timing than an LS, probably because the heads are more efficient. You get better cylinder filling, so you get you need less spark advance to make the power.
I feel like on an LS, the knock sensors are basically just useless.
Yeah.
Like,
again, it's like a learning curve thing. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. So the Hemi stuff was the next one. I was going to ask if it was Coyote.
I have trans adapters for Coyotes and Godzillas. Engine swap kits are forthcoming. But.
The problem with 240s is the oil pans suck no matter what.
Yes.
No matter who you get it from. It's the way that K-member is set up. It makes it annoying.
Yeah.
Right
they're
away.
all front sump. Same 240, 350Z, 370Z. They all suffer from the same front sump configuration. And it can be problematic, with oil control, especially like drag racing applications. You want a rear sump to keep the oil at the pickup. On a road course car, it matters a little bit less, but it's still like we spent a lot of time with our oil pan supplier working on like baffling strategies in the pan for oil control. Like it's important, but we have guys that like pro amateur level drifting on a wet sump pan and it works. On some of those like real high grip cars, like we'll put AccuSumps on them too to help. Mm-hmm. But like even my truck's still on a wet sump, but I run an AccuSump on it when I'm on the road course just to keep it alive because oil control is like the lifeblood of the motor. You got to keep it alive.
Yeah, especially when you got turbos also taking some oil pressure from it. Yeah, the AccuSumps are pretty convenient, but then it adds that level of safety, I guess, is nice.
Yeah.
And then dry sump is that next.
And that's the ideal with the next motor is to go dry sump, but it's
expensive step.
It's always money.
Like billet oil pan and all.
Yeah. They have daily engineering stuff, which is like a work of art.
Mm-hmm. But, I mean, you could probably try to make like some Corvette stuff work though, no? Like
we could. The front diff makes clearance issues in there. With the Nissans, it's weird because nobody does it. So like I feel like every time I try something, I'm like designing new parts because there's just not a lot of support out there for them. But
that's probably a good thing, though.
Yeah,
I mean that's probably good for the
business side.
For the business side of things to not have these things available because if they're available, it kind of not be as beneficial.
Yeah, it's funny. Like the Frontiers, like I said before, how they're all built on the same platform as like the Armadas and Titans. Like the Nissan V8 is a bolt-in swap in the Frontiers and the Xteras because it's the same frame. The parts bolt in. So that was kind of actually a miscalculation on my part when I developed the Frontier swap kits. I tried to do it as like a budget option compared to the VK56, the Nissan V8. But you can't do it cheaper when the factory parts just bolt in and you can buy rotted out Titans for like $2,500 now. It's like you're not going to compete with that. And if guys just want to go off road and make more torque for rock crawling and stuff, I'll flat out tell them when they call me now, like put the VK56 in it.
Yeah.
But like if you want any more power than that motor makes stock, then the LS makes sense. Because it'll cost you a little more money to get the LS in it at the start, but when you want to start adding power later, you are going to save boatloads over what modifying one of the Nissan V8s cost.
Well, and the simplicity and parts availability is
and it's 140 pounds lighter, and it's like absolutely. But
if you're out rock crawling and your rocker arm breaks on an LS, it's pretty easy to fix. But if you got some weird obscure Nissan swap, it may not be as
you can go to any parts store and find parts to fix it at any time. AutoZone, Advanced Auto Parts, but good luck with the Nissan motor. So there's absolutely like business cases for both to make sense. But if you want reliability, simplicity, and more power down the road, the LS is the way to go, even if it costs a little bit more money up front to get it in there. So
yeah, it's kind of always the move. I mean, on my Mustang, like when I put that together, I wanted to make sure as many parts on it were factory as possible, just because.
Yep.
I mean, I've also kind of always started to learn that factory parts seem to be a lot better a lot of the time than a lot of aftermarket parts.
They do.
Not to, I know you make aftermarket parts, but a lot of these aftermarket parts aren't as reliable as a good old factory component.
Well, when they
spend starters and stuff.
Absolutely. They spend millions of dollars in R&D on this stuff. They got entire teams of engineers designing parts, and they're continually refreshing designs as parts fail to improve them. Well, some manufacturers do, some do.
Some slip away as the quality slips away pretty quickly on some stuff. Like you look at new parts that are coming out now, the same replacement parts that aren't as good as like an old part. Like I know Moog basically makes like everything now.
Yep.
And some of that stuff isn't quite the same quality as like the OEM original 90s like ball, like a what is it, like the
tie
tie
rods, or
rods
ball
and
joints,
stuff like
yeah.
that. Like I was looking at them, like, oh man, like these Reman aren't quite as nice.
No, they have like the Moog, like I think Supreme or Premium line now, which is a little better. But honestly, after 2020, I feel like almost anything that was made, especially if it was like overseas sourced, the quality just went like just a crap. Like we see like Godzilla lifters like failing all the time, and Hemi lifters and all. And it's all the same lifter that's in an LS too. I'm pretty sure they're all Hemi might not be, but I think Godzilla you can interchange them. But it's a quality thing, like the material science and all. They're just one of the worst classes I took in college that gave me perspective. We took an engineering course basically designing parts to have a finite life. Like you could figure out how many cycles a crankshaft could spin before it would break.
Yeah.
And they wanted you to like learn how to minimize the amount of material in to reach your target life expectancy. And like back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, like we didn't have the computer analysis power that we have now to really find that limit. So parts were just over-engineered, and that's why like the rear diffs, like you were saying in the 80s and 90s Nissans, like you can go crazy fast because they just threw more material at it to put an extra margin. But now they can figure out how to make stuff just strong enough to do the job they intended to do, and then it fails. Like there's a reason why Hyundai has a 100,000-mile warranty on their vehicles, because at 102,000 miles, stuff breaks, and they figured that out. So
yeah, we've talked about this before, where with other people, where I think like the over-engineered engines of the past are kind of gone. Like
for sure,
a big block, a bone stock big block motor can make so much power because it was so over-engineered and over-braced. But now they're so, like you're saying, so on the ragged edge of any more power through that aluminum block, and suddenly it just splits in half. That over-engineered is gone, like a Honda K series. So over-engineered for what they were trying to do.
Yeah, and people are talking about the new L series Honda motors for swapping, like the new turbo motors that are in the Civics and stuff. But I'm curious if Honda has kind of figured that out now. Yeah, like they're not as strong. I don't know. They haven't been out long enough.
I think they have that stupid built-in cylinder head.
The exhaust manifold
setup
is the head. Like, yeah.
God, that makes me sick thinking about that.
Like, I think about all the guys that run like CNC head porting companies. Be like, how long does that end mill have to be to get in there? And
it's just such like I've never even touched one, but I know that's got to be a level of frustration.
Sure, but I mean, it's also a cost savings thing. So you understand from an OE perspective why they do it, but it doesn't make our lives easier in an aftermarket. So
I've gotten to spend some time with the guys, the Johnson lifters, and they used to make more OEM parts and lifters, but the quality that they wanted and the quality that the OEM were okay with were so far apart that they couldn't supply OEM anymore, because they were fine with junk, basically. OEM was fine with getting junk, and they weren't fine with supplying it. So
they have some ethics, and they can't supply parts that lower quality.
Yeah. So they were like, we're done dealing with you guys. And they were like, we supply millions a year of OEM parts to people, and they didn't want to do it anymore. So it was pretty cool to hear that level of ethic that they actually cared about.
I mean, that's a big thing for me. I mean, you may not know, or you probably do know, but a lot of people probably don't know. Like LOJ has been around 11 years now. For essentially 9 or 10 of those 11 years, it was just me. It was a one-man show. Like I designed the parts, I would answer the phone, I'd process orders, I'd pack boxes. It was a side business. Like I still to this day have a day job. I got to get health insurance for my family somehow, and now last year I hired Blaine, my sales manager. He's the first full-time employee I've had, and it's been great because I have time freed up now to design more parts, which is why I'm releasing a bunch of new stuff the last year and this year. But like, I take pride in what I do. I do my best to design the best parts I can. Everything's made in the U.S. from U.S. suppliers with U.S. materials, wherever I can. Listen, some bolts, they might come from overseas. I don't know. I buy them from McMaster-Carr or wherever. But I try my best to make parts that last. But we're all human. We all make mistakes. And I've had parts that fail. And I stand behind my products, replace them for people, redesign them to be stronger so they don't break again, and the next guy who buys one doesn't have that problem. But I try, and kind of like you're saying with Johnson lifters, like they want to make stuff that works and lasts. They're not okay just selling garbage, and
they're not race to the bottom dollar like a lot of companies are. Just try to make it cheaper and cheaper. And like with you, when I ordered your oil pan, I was like, oh, this is a nice OEM GM gasket along with it. It's not like some junk Felt Pro, like not Felt Pro exactly, but that's, you know what I mean? Like those kind of little things where they could save money but send junk parts out. You get like a nice MLS rubber gasket, like those kind of little things that make the product that much better.
It's funny you mentioned that too, because gosh, the number of people that we see on like Facebook groups complaining about the price of my oil pan and comparing it to like a Summit, like Chinese made pan that's a third of the price. It's like, yeah, the pan's a third of a price, but it doesn't include a pickup. It doesn't include a dipstick. It doesn't include gasket. It doesn't include hardware. It doesn't have any baffling in it. And it doesn't even fit the car right. Like it hangs below the cross member an inch. It's like, then I think we've probably sold more oil pans to people who bought that pan, realized how terrible it was, and was like, I should have just spent the good money in the first place. And it's like, yeah, because the parts are made to fit the car, you know? Were you at LS Fest in 2019 when we swapped the car in the parking lot?
I think I was. I feel like I was there. Maybe not in 19. Maybe 18 was my most recent one. I haven't been in a while.
Yeah, we drove a G35 from Jersey with a stock V6 in it to LS Fest, swapped it in my vendor booth, and we started the swap Friday morning. We turned the key to start the car Friday afternoon at 4:30. We were charging the AC Saturday morning at 10:30, and we were done at noon.
That's awesome.
And it was like, I remember, I think it was Speedway Motors. The guy walked over because he was like set up across from us. He put $100 on the windshield. He's like, "There's no way this car drives out of here after the weekend." And I got to keep the $100. But my buddy's still driving that G35 today. It was his car. He's still got it. It's like, if you make parts that fit and bolt in, like you can make swaps reliable. It's just, it takes effort.
Yeah. And I mean, and if you know what you're doing, I guess that helps a lot as well.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I saw one of your Infiniti FX swaps, and that was the first time I ever saw an Infiniti FX, and I was like, wow, this is actually a really cool looking car. Like it's almost like a car size,
little SUV,
but it's like an SUV, but then like it has all this engine bay space. I don't know, after seeing that with an LS, I had like this real interest in that car.
Was that the one with the LSA setup in it?
I think so. Yeah. It was down here getting tuned at Jeremy's.
Yep.
There was a black one.
Oh, no, that was, okay.
It was a customer.
Yeah, that one, a customer still lives in Jersey that drives that one. He was actually at the shop Monday this week.
It was just weird because I'd never seen an Infiniti FX before, and I don't know why those cars seem like they actually look, and they seem like a really cool car.
So that's another thing where like, I had people calling asking about kits for those cars, and I looked at it. I was like, who would want to swap this thing? Like, I just don't. So finally, I went on Infiniti's like factory parts site and started comparing the part numbers of the factory motor mounts and the factory oil pan, and they're all the same part numbers as G35 stuff. And I'm like, tell me my G35 kit just works in this thing.
So it's just a big G35.
Yeah. So we went to the junkyard and bought one out of the junkyard for like $1,000. It had bullet holes in the door, like it was at Newark, New Jersey, and
classic.
Yeah, and we called it the Silver Bullet, and I converted it from all-wheel drive to two-wheel drive because it was the two-wheel drive cross member is what the parts fit with, and sure enough, my whole kit just bolted right in. The wiring harness was unique. The CAN data is different, so I needed different CAN language to make the gauges work, and the radiator is bigger in an FX. But other than that, the headers, the motor mounts, the oil pan, all that's the same. And we put an LSA in that one. It was a 6-liter iron motor with an LSA blower that Jeremy ported for me. That thing made 780 wheel and went like 10 twos in a quarter mile.
Oh, wow.
It had a 6L90 in it with an FTI converter, like a 3,000 RPM stall converter, stock ECU, meth injection. I want to say it went 10 twos or 10 fives, somewhere in that range. And we were talking earlier about the R200 diffs, the rear diffs. Literally one pass is all a diff would survive.
Really?
So I would launch it, run the whole pass, and when I lifted off the throttle at the top end, the diff would be whining like crazy because it would like deform the crush sleeve on the pinion gear. And we'd go back to the pits, drop the diff out, put another diff in, make another hit on it, and it was just one pass per diff because the thing weighed 4,600 pounds. So like it was too much for it. And
it just seems like, to me, I saw that and I was thinking, I was like, oh, this seems like the best budget for like a luxury, like almost like CTSV-like, because they have the luxury interior of the Infiniti, not the Nissan.
And it's kind of a wagon too, so it's almost like a V hatchback wagon kind of thing.
Yeah, because there's not that many like little SUVs that could like happily have an LS swap, but also have nice interior and all that fit that weird description of like a classy, cool black with black interior, full screens and everything inside. It's kind of like a unique car in that aspect, I guess.
And the one you saw had like a heads cam LS3 in it. I think it made like 500 wheel all motor. And that thing, again, same diff setup, but because it makes a little bit less power and it's on street tires, not slicks, like the diff's fine. The guy beats the snot out of it and has a great time with it, but you find limits on the drag strip that you would never find on the street. So,
and it had all the engine bay space, which I felt was nice
because they had a V8 option from the factory. So they had a ton of room, and the Nissan V8's huge, and an LS is tiny. So
because even like you see like these Colorados swapped with LSs, and they don't fit. Like that thing actually like you could work on it, which I kind of
you even put a high ram intake on it, and it fits under the hood. Like it's kind of crazy,
It's kind of cheating.
To
be able to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it's funny. And then like even the Nissans are interesting because like the 350Zs have that stupid way that the firewall goes. And it seems like they carried that across a lot of cars as well.
So it's like a secondary firewall. It doesn't actually, that's not what separates the passenger compartment.
Yeah, it's like this is just where the battery goes.
Yeah, battery on one side, the master cylinders on the other. And it's like, why is this here other than to make the engine bay more cramped?
Yeah.
Like every track car that we build, we cut that secondary firewall out because it just makes access to the rear cylinders for like spark plug checks and stuff like that way easier. Street cars, you don't have to. The kits fit with it there. But like if you're building a race car, stuff's going to break, you're going to work on it, just cut that stuff out. It just makes life easier.
It's so odd that they added all that. I don't know if it was for bracing or if it
even my M has it. Like that, everything from like the early 2000s on has it. I don't see how it does anything structural, I'll be honest with you. I think it's aesthetic. It holds the plastic covers up and all, and I don't know.
Keeps the battery away from the heat, maybe. Isn't that where they put the battery?
Yeah, batteries in one side,
So
strange.
Weird Nissan stuff. Nissan's always been kind of like that. I've always been more of a Toyota guy than the Nissan guy, and I imagine you're more of a... You're not... I wouldn't consider you as much of a Nissan guy because everything has LSs in it, so you're kind of like just Nissan chassis guy.
Yeah, I mean... I do very little with actual Nissan engines. We have a 240Z in the shop that we're putting a VR38 out of a GTR in, so it's like a 70 240Z with the GTR motor. So like, okay, that's a Nissan motor I'll play with. But like every other car, like people will call up us and be like, can you fix my VG30 or my VQ35? And I'll be like, I'm not your guy, dude. I'll fix it by ripping it out and putting an LS in. But other than that, like...
Well, a lot of the time, it's probably a better budget option for a lot of these guys that have broken VQs and are going to put back a factory VQ. You might as well just switch up to the LS at some point. You got to cut your losses.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I learned when I designed the LS swap kit for the 300ZX, the very first kit I made. I expected my customers to be non-turbo Z owners that wanted to put an LS in instead of converting to twin turbo. But it ended up being twin turbo owners that were tired of the headaches and the maintenance nightmare and how expensive they were to fix and just wanted something cheaper and more reliable. I had a customer that used to track his twin turbo Z down at VIR, Virginia International Raceway, all the time. And he had onboard footage with the twin turbo setup, and his twin turbo motor made 500 wheel. And he pulled the twin turbo motor out and put an 420 wheel horse LS1 in it. It pulled 170 pounds off the nose of the car, and he went 1.2 seconds faster per lap, making less power because the car was lighter on the nose, it handled better, and it had a broader power band than the turbo setup. So like he was tickled pink. I mean, he still tracks that car to this day, and God, he's had that car swapped for 10 years now. So
yeah, that's a reasonable swap, and the CD09s are good trans. So if you cut the bell housing or however, I don't know how you do it on yours.
We do it with an adapter plate.
That makes it easier for the average guy.
It does for the average guy. There's benefits to both, right? So like if you run the stock bell housing, then your stock clutch hydraulics and all still fit and work, which means your pedal and master cylinder and all still work, which is nice. But the stock bell housing limits you on clutch size because the bell is only fit a 10-inch clutch in there. If you cut the bell and put an LS bell on, okay, now you can fit an LS clutch, you run an LS starter, LS flywheel, but now you have to change all your clutch hydraulics out because that concentric slave in the T56 slave is too big for the Nissan Master, so you got to swap the Master, modify your pedal. like I said, there's multiple ways to skin a cat. We did the route that's easier for the average guy to install himself.
Well, for me too, I would think it's nice because if you do break your CDO9 and you're at the track for a weekend, you can just get another CDO9. You don't have to like get one, cut the bell housing with a cutoff wheel, and somehow make that all adapt again.
Yep. And even when you cut the bell housing and run the LS flywheel and stuff, your clutch is still custom because you have a Nissan input shaft. Yeah. So like it like I said, multiple ways to skin a cat. Mm-hmm. The cool thing with the CDO9 too is the Frontier trucks came with a 6-speed manual, which is basically CDO9 guts in a different case. And it's got a big bell that you can fit a 12-inch clutch in, and it's got a shifter mounted right to the top of the trans. So we've been making adapters and selling them to guys now that are putting these Frontier transmissions in OBS trucks, Chevelles, like old muscle cars, because you can pick up one of those transmissions if you're thrifty at a junkyard for $500, $700. The adapter is $1,000. You're half the price of just the T56 trans, and you get a nice 6-speed manual trans that holds a ton of power because it's the same guts as the CDO9. So,
well, even like my Camaro has an adapter plate to the Power Glide. You know, it's still GM Power Glide.
Yep.
Like that bell, whatever the bolt pattern, and then it goes to the adapter plate. It's like an inch adapter plate, and then I have like an inch thick flywheel on it. So it's or flex plate. So it's still adapter plate.
Is that a motor plate car or is it?
Yeah, it's motor plate. So it's kind of cool. The adapter plate has motor plate ears built into it.
Oh, nice.
So it's mid plated and then motor plated, but the adapter plate has the ears on it, which makes it really convenient.
I've had customers ask, like, can you modify your adapter plates to put ears on them for motor plates? Mm-hmm. It's like, I can, but then my headers don't fit anymore because it's like.
But if you're doing a turbo kit, it kind of doesn't matter anyways.
Yeah, for sure.
I would imagine once you're doing mid-plate, motor plate, you're kind of in a different realm of customer.
Yeah, for sure.
But it makes it easy because like my car doesn't have motor mounts. It's mid-plate, motor plate only, which on a long motor like that keeps it from twisting and keeps the head from moving too much.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, we've found comparing to other customers that run the same combo as me, my cylinder head stays a lot more planted just because it's stiffer. Because if you rely on, motor mounts that were supposed to make, 250 horsepower?
Yeah.
You're going to probably get some twist.
Yeah. There. Interesting. So, I would have never even considered that. But
it might be similar on LSs too, especially on an aluminum block like for your car. You might find you get less flex as well in the block.
Yeah.
Of course, not as long, so it kind of helps.
The transmission in the truck's ridiculously long though with the transfer case and all that. There's a lot of weight hanging off the back of that motor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's literally just 2 bolts on like 2 holes on either side of my mid plate. That's all it needs.
Interesting.
So it makes it super simple, and then they sell 10 different ears that you can try to see what fits in your chassis best.
Really?
Yeah, ATF makes a pretty good 2J swap kit. I don't know if you do any 2J stuff at all.
I've had a lot of requests for 2J stuff. Sure. I probably should if I, got my head out of my butt a little bit. But
I would say I think it's dying a little bit because they're less attainable than they used to be. So it's becoming it's just going to be less and less swaps of 2Js because there's only so many left anymore.
It's one of the reasons It's one of the reasons I pushed into the LTs, and now even with the Hemis, like, listen, we just released a Hemi kit this year. I've sold a couple. Mm-hmm. I don't expect it to be as popular and explosive as an LS, but it's definitely not cheaper than an LS. Mm-hmm. But guys like to be different. Like, not everybody just wants to have a cookie cutter LS swap car. A lot of Hemi guys or Mopar guys want different cars that they can put them into. So we'll see if it takes off or not. But the Hemis, they're still a recent motor that was sold in the U.S. You can buy crate Hellcats and stuff. So.
Well, there's a couple of V8 options now that are even like the Godzillas are. I don't know if those will ever take off, honestly. They didn't come in enough cars.
Yeah.
Still, currently, they don't come in enough cars to where they're going to take off like an LS. I know a lot of people wish they will.
I think you know about the 6.7 Godzilla too now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'll help because now, like, it used to be the base Super Duty motor was the old 6.2 overhead cam setup, and then the 7.3 was the big V8 option. But now they have the small Godzilla and the big Godzilla, so, like, any gas Super Duty has a Godzilla in it now. It's whether it's a 6.7 or whatever it is.
Yeah, 6.7.
6.7.
Yeah. Very LS architecture
sure is.
style engine.
Yeah.
Like if you just saw a bare block next to each other, it'd be
Yeah.
For the untrained eye, you'd be probably a little skeptical on which switch.
The big issue on them, again, is the oil system. Like the way that they put the oil pump into the windage tray all as one deal, like it makes it very problematic for swaps. There's a couple, like Holly just released the new front drive that uses like an LS style pump on it, which allows you to put any sump configuration you want, which I think is going to do great things for the aftermarket for that motor, but it's still, like you said, there's nowhere near as many of those out there as RLSs. So
it's just weird because Ford was like, they're trying to push it as a crate motor, but then it's also not very swap friendly because of that. You know, you need like a truck. You can't drop it as low, because Garrett did it in the Mustang, but like I think he fought with dropping it as low as they wanted it to,
because
that
the
oil pan
pan's so
hangs
deep,
so low. So it's weird to kind of do two things at once that kind of don't correlate that well. And then if you're on their website and you see a Coyote and you see a you're like, man, the
Coyotes make crazy
pretty
power.
much better in every way.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I have a 7.3 Godzilla sitting in the shop right now that we bought to develop kits with, and I have the trans adapters for them. And we're probably gonna put one into a Nissan truck at some point, just because I got it, you know. But will it take off like the others? I don't know. But people like options, so
yeah. I mean, somebody's got to make kits for them. So I mean, like,
and Harrop makes those blowers for him now that make crazy power. I don't know. I don't think Magnuson's releasing one yet, but still, I mean, there's options out there to make big power with them.
Yeah, they'll make like 1,200 horsepower without even sneezing. Like they just easily make that. Once you try to make like 2,000, I think you start to get into some questions. But like everything,
like everything. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, it's an interesting thing. I really like the future of the LTs, and then also those weird V6s that
the LV3.
Yes,
it's like a Gen 5 V6. Yeah, we got one of those at the shop too.
And they look just like a little LT. They're just like a little tiny LT, and people I've even seen cut the Holly high rams and make them look like they fit on there well.
I saw somebody put an LT4 blower on one and just weld plates over the back two cylinders. So it bolted on, the whole LT4 accessory drive bolted on, and he just covered the back two ports of the supercharger. So he had a LT4 blower on a LV3 V6.
That seems like a cool option for, I don't know though, when do you put that in something versus a V8?
Well, space, right? I mean, it's two cylinders shorter lengthwise. So like, honestly, it would be a great swap for a 300ZX because length is an issue in those cars. I mean, the LS stuff fits, but if you freed up that kind of space in front, I'll be honest with you, something I've wanted to build if I had infinite time and money, which I don't, but I would love to take one of those LV3s and put a 6L90 behind it and put it in an old like Grand National and have like the modern V6 turboed with the modern 6-speed trans, or even the 8-speed or 10-speed if you can get the electronics to work.
I was talking to my buddy with a Cyclone kind of the same way.
Yeah.
I was like, it kind of would feel right almost, you know?
The Cyclone would be awesome because it's lighter than the 4.3 that came out. It should bolt right to the trans that's in it.
It would feel right too.
Yeah.
You know, it wouldn't feel like blasphemous almost like a V8. Like, 'cause there's kind of something special about those cars. They're like a Typhoon.
Yeah.
Something like that.
There's a guy you just had on the show the other day had the Cyclone and Typhoon. Forget his name. But
he's got both. Leo. Yep. He's got. It's a weird type of person that has both of those that really, really fixated on those two cars.
One of my first street racing experiences as a kid was I had never been in anything fast, and my neighbor had a first gen Eagle Talon, like a 50 trim. It was like a 11.9 car in 1997, so it was fast for 1997 by today's standards. It's like stock Civic, but not really, but you know what I mean. And I remember going out where the local street races were, and we raced against a guy in a Cyclone. It was like a dead heat. I'm like, that truck's fast, you know. Like I knew nothing. I was a 17-year-old kid, you know. I was learning, but
didn't realize just how cool it was.
Yeah, exactly. Looking back now, it's like it's a pretty awesome truck.
Didn't McLaren buy their engine architecture from Nissan? I've heard, like their V6 that they've put in everything like that.
I have not heard that.
Architecture was bought from. I'm pretty sure that was like the original deal. And McLaren is a big. They buy from anyone and anything, so it wouldn't be completely unheard of.
That's wild. I haven't heard that. I believe it, but
yeah, I'd have to look more into that because I don't remember if that's. I think it's just for like the 650s, like the earlier stuff, I guess.
Oh, okay.
But you have a GTR motor too.
Yeah.
You said you're putting in something. Those motors are probably the only really, really good sounding V6, I'd say.
Probably, yeah.
I think that's kind of it.
Yeah, we're putting it in a 240Z, so an old tiny little 2,000-pound car, and we put a pair of Garrett G25s on it. The guy that we're building it for, like, he didn't want like the typical GTR 2,000 horsepower. He's like, this is a tiny car. Like 700 or 800 wheel in this thing is going to feel ridiculous.
Yeah.
And we used one of our adapters to put the CDO9 behind it. Well, it's not the CDO9, it's the 370Z version. Whatever, same guts inside.
Close enough.
Yeah, close enough. I know somebody in the comment section, that's not a CDO9. Okay, chill, guys.
Yeah.
For
I
the
know
average
my Transit, my 240, I think it was like a CDO1.
Yeah. But they roll the last number every time they make a revision of the internals. It's a CD trans. But they're actually CDO-As now, or the most recent one. It's not 9s. After 9 was
Is it
A.
stronger?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. If you buy a new one from the dealer, it's a CDO-A now. But the newer, the 370Z, has a different bolt pattern where it bolts to the engine. And it's not a CD anything. It's like it's not a JK. I don't even know what it is off the top of my head. But
what kind of struggles are you running into with the GTR engine? Because not many people swap those, so I imagine there's some...
Oil pan is the biggest one, because you can't swap a pan from like a rear-wheel drive VQ onto it. The block's different. The oil pans have the front diff and all in them, so we actually converted to a daily dry sump on that one. Rather than completely restructuring the cross member and steering in the car, we just put a dry sump on it. And then the factory turbos don't fit at all because that engine bay is too narrow, so we did custom tubular manifolds for the Garrett setup. They're kind of high mount now. This customer, again, is going more of a show car, fast show car, like nice street car look than a dedicated race car.
Yeah.
So like, you got to take all that into consideration when you're planning a build for a customer. You know, what are they going to do with the car? But beyond that, it's been pretty straightforward. There's a lot of room lengthwise in those cars because they have the straight sixes in them. So there's like, you could almost put 2 GTR engines in front of each other in that engine bay, like no kidding.
Yeah.
So there's going to be plenty of room for stacking intercoolers and the radiator and all the heat exchangers. That'll be easy. There's room for the dry sump oil tank too, but that oil pan clearance was for sure, like we tried racking our brains 50 different ways to make the factory pan fit just by removing the front diff, but it wasn't happening.
Well, it's a unique car too, so you don't want to do anything kind of any sort of not perfect on that because there's not many of them, and then all the ones that you see are rust covered half the time.
Especially in the Northeast where we're from.
Yeah.
This customer's from Long Island, which I think is where you're from originally.
Yep, 18 years on Long Island.
Yeah. So he has 2 Zs. He actually has one with a Maggie supercharged LS1 in it that we pulled the factory P411 ECU off and put a Haltech on it and retuned it, and like the drivability is so much better. We converted it from drive-by-cable to drive-by-wire, which made the idle stability way better and lots of stuff, and he loved that. So now we're building this other car for him too. He loves his Zs, his old Datsuns. So.
Yeah, it's a specific architect of person that likes the old Zs like that.
I don't fit in it, man. I legit, like I felt like I was in a clown car trying to drive the thing, test driving, but you know, I'm a big guy, so.
It's funny, my grandma always talks about how she had one and how much she loved it, and like when they were new type of thing, and she didn't think anything of it at the time, and of course it's long gone now, unfortunately, because it's just like she's like, oh, the floor was rusted out when it was new.
Yeah,
and I mean, guess they like came over
paper thin sheet metal on them and all.
And they came from overseas already rusty from being on the boats, so they were already ruined. Half of them were just cooked. There's so many Nissans being imported right now too, which is an interesting thing. There's so many RBs, which junk, but there's a lot of them coming into the U.S.
RBs have their place. For the Nissan diehard, it's a good motor, but compared to a JZ, you can't. If I'm being realistic, so
their place is about 300 horsepower.
Yeah, I had an RB26 swap 300ZX years ago. I put the GTR motor in a 300ZX, and that was fun. It made like 500 wheel, and it was fairly reliable at that power level. But you know, when you want big power, like the JZ block is just way stiffer than an RB block. Like if you're going to make big power out of an import straight 6, you go with the JZ. Although I think one of those places down in Australia is now casting RB blocks, like aftermarket blocks, not billet, like aftermarket cast blocks, and supposedly fixed all of those issues. So we'll see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because even Dart are gonna start recasting the 2J blocks as well. Yeah, they've designed like how they make like LS blocks. They're casting their own 2J blocks again, so that'll be nice for the market. But the unfortunate thing is the crank. Yeah. So
Isn't Toyota selling blocks new now too?
They're not quite the same from what I've heard.
Really?
They're selling heads again too, new cast heads. But from what I've heard, they're not quite the same. They just don't.
Not the same alloy as back then.
Yeah, they're not the same spec, not the same.
The figures.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah.
Because like you get so excited, you're like, oh, brand new OEM parts, and then it's like, not what the 90s.
Not what it used to be.
Yeah, because there's no way they can cast the same way they used to. I mean, there was no regulations on anything. They used to.
I've talked to like some of the companies that make aftermarket cylinder heads for the LSs, and they're saying now, unfortunately, the stronger heads come from overseas, not the U.S. foundries. And I don't know if this is true or not. So, but from what I've heard, because they don't have the same restrictions over there in the foundries, so they can get away with processes that we can't do over here. So the parts end up being stronger, which is unfortunate.
I've heard that from the stock bottom end LS guys too.
Really?
That the blocks that were made in Mexico are better than the blocks that were made, like, you know how you're talking specific part numbers and stuff on blocks? They're talking specific foundries that had stronger
the casting
ones.
number on the block?
Yeah, like the ones that were cast in Mexico were just a little bit better. like they get really specific when you're trying to chase that number.
Yeah, seriously, that's a little beyond where I'm going.
I'd rather just buy like a Dart block or an LSX block or something and move on. But those stock bottom end guys get pretty serious on those things.
Yeah, I heard a podcast with the guy from Texas Speed. I think it was, again, your podcast.
Yeah.
He was talking about the NA bottom end record that they set in that fifth gen Camaro, and how I guess his engine builder wanted a specific block casting for that. I was like, I would have never even considered.
It's so interesting.
It really is, but beyond like what my brain space can handle.
Well, even on like they get those Barra blocks in Australia.
Yep.
And they take like sheet metal, like square like pieces of metal, and weld them to the sides of the block in certain spots on like the casting to try to strengthen it up.
Oh my gosh.
So they're like welding slugs of metal onto these blocks. And I mean, hey, it's necessity breeds that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they're going fast with them, so.
It works.
It
and
does.
It's such a tall block. It's got to have so much distortion in it. It's got to be so hard to keep that thing stable. It's so long and tall block. Like the LS is so kind of compact. It's got to be tough.
It's funny, like the Australian market, it's crazy. Like I sell a lot of kits to guys down there. They do a lot of wild stuff with their cars. So it's cool. And it kind of stinks we never got the Barra here. Like, I know some guys have been importing them. I don't follow it too much, but like to me,
It's starting to pick up.
It's still kind of crazy though. Like the aftermarket support, not even so much aftermarket, but like you said, getting OEM parts like gaskets and stuff. Like, you know, you have a front main seal fail on a Barra, and maybe it's the same as some other Ford engine. I don't know, but like figuring all that out and trying to find the parts, like that's tough. It's a nice novelty thing to me, but for like something you actually want to go racing with and be competitive, you need to be able to get replacement parts.
Yeah, 100%. Because my buddy Ben, he had one that he was racing in a Fox body. They had one in a Fox body, and they're racing Sick Week.
Okay.
And that's pretty tough to do. So there was two cars, and they had one spare motor between them, just full, ready to go, spare everything.
Is that
like,
Betty from Australia?
Yeah.
They came up, it's the black Fox body they did, right?
They had a black Fox body, and then it's
Cresta
a Cressida, which
yeah.
is something that we didn't really get either. But they were racing those two, and they just had to have a spare everything with them because you can't get anything. And then even on the crank, they have so much harmonics that you have to weld all your crank bolts because they back out. 100% guaranteed to back out. I got a buddy with a
like
MK3
the flywheel
Supra.
bolts, or
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they all weld them. My buddy, like, they've tried safety wire. My buddy has one in a MK3 Supra that he drifts.
Really?
It's a kind of a weird deal in itself, but he had to like fully weld all of those bolts.
That is insane.
And then you kind of make that pretty tough to service. It.
Sure do. Yeah. You don't really want to be getting in your engine with a grinder just to get your flywheel off.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And then especially welding like a nice ARP bolt isn't exactly the most.
I mean, there's also effects on like the tensile strength of the bolt from the heat and all that too. So wow, crazy.
I know it's a tough deal that the harmonics are that bad. It's a worrying thing to hear about.
Yeah, you would
motor.
think like a well-balanced motor, they would resolve that, or like a fluid damper or an ATI damper. But
I think that's even like when you ask like the baddest Australian engine builders, they're like, yeah, you just weld those. It's like, oh,
crazy.
Okay,
I had no idea.
Guess so. That makes sense. So I guess the crank is just that one-time use. You just pull the whole thing out.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's just gone. But then the Coyotes have become so good for similar price that it's hard to really.
Yeah.
If you're going for a Ford motor, it's hard to really.
I really do want to mess with the Coyote at some point, and I've had enough people fill in my inbox with requests for them. I don't know that it'll physically fit in like a 350Z or a G35. Definitely not without cutting that firewall out in the back we were talking about before.
Seen them in a Miata.
Have you? Okay.
I think half of it sticks up out of the Miata though.
There's a guy that runs the Optima series, Go Moto. They're out of Louisiana. They do like all like Miatas and BRZs and stuff, and they have a K-swapped Miata and a Ford EcoBoost, like the 4-cylinder Mustang EcoBoost swap Miata, and that EcoBoost Miata is rowdy. That guy won the compact car championship last year. He was like the 3rd fastest car on track, period, in a Miata on 200 treadwear tires, like crazy.
Those EcoBoosts are cool. Chelsea Denofa runs one in his Fox body.
Does he?
Yeah, he's got a little Fox body, super lightweight. It's IRS swapped because I guess the IRS from the Terminators built into those.
Yeah.
So it's like an IRS drift car, super light, and he keeps up with almost anything.
That's wild.
Because of the weight, but he goes through almost no tires. And it's just like a gas and go car, and it seems like the perfect drift car. He never even opens the hood of it. It's just this little EcoBoost.
Well, it's funny, you were talking before about how you never like read the rules and stuff. Like once it gets into that, it gets too nitty gritty. We were on a road trip to one of these races looking at the rule book, and we saw that technically a C5 Corvette or C6 Corvette fit the weight and wheelbase requirements of the compact car class if you put a 4-cylinder in it. Like, if we put a 4-cylinder EcoBoost in a Corvette and ran the compact car class, it'd be wild. But we talked to Jimmy about that. He's like, that's not really in the spirit of what a compact car is, so we probably wouldn't let you run. And I'm like, I get it.
Well, the K series too get a little weird when you start to longitudinally put them. Everybody that I've seen do that seems to not like it that much because
it's serviceability. Like the engine wasn't designed for that.
And the harmonics as well, again, is another weird one.
Is it?
They're balanced. They're not like motor mount wise. They're kind of meant to be not like that.
You know, it's funny you mentioned
they
that.
Vibrate.
I watched, I was sitting on the couch with my kids the other night watching the Gears and Gasoline YouTube channel, and they had 2 FDR X7s, and one of them was K-swapped, and they were talking the whole time about the vibrations in the K-swap car.
That's what I've heard.
NVH. Interesting.
Yeah, because I know Taylor Ray did one in his car, and I don't think he loved it that much just because, like, it's got a weird vibration thing to it.
Huh.
I don't... Because you don't see them that much.
You really don't. And a lot of guys do it in BRZs. Like there's kits out there that it's like bolt in, and you know the Subaru motors. If you want to talk about bad motors, they're high on the list.
They're easy to service though. They're easy to take a Subaru motor out. That's one thing I will say about anytime I've ever worked on a Subaru. You can take that motor out in like 45 minutes if it doesn't have a turbo on it.
That's because they know it's going to break and you're just going to have to replace it. So.
They do know it's going to break. But then the flip side of the BRZs is they're such a cool car.
Yeah. I have one. I've been daily driving one for months now because we want to do kits for them. So I bought one and been driving it, and we have a K-swap ready for it. We have an LS ready for it, and maybe a Coyote. I don't know.
Like there's this 3 cars that kind of fit that same thing, like the Z, the BRZ, and like the Genesis of like those kind of new age, I guess, JDM small compact cars.
Yeah, we do the Genesis kits too. We have one at the shop we just did actually, and Blaine was saying on the drive down here, he's like, I was on Facebook and you can pick up a Genesis coupe for like $1,500. It's like,
crazy.
Yeah.
And that's like a good starter chassis car. Like they look good enough. Like they're pretty good looking cars. But then the BRZ just like they were so close to hitting the mark on that car.
Yeah.
Like they were right there. The STIs
turbo
are
motor
so
would have
cool.
been like a turbo motor would have been the way. And apparently they got it in like the UK, but not here because it wouldn't pass emissions or something. I don't know what.
And they tried to trick people to make them think they were better by putting really small tires on them. They were like, people think these are real hot rods if you put like a 195 tire on the back of it and it spins the tires in first.
Yep.
And maybe chirps into second.
It'll chirp second. I speak from experience.
And I think
it is the slowest thing I've ever driven. I kid you not. It is abysmally slow, but it handles really well and like it looks cool. So I'm looking forward to swapping it with something that actually makes power in the future.
It's so crazy that they marketed that thing as a sports car and it's slower than like an Altima.
Yeah.
Like that just.
Well, it's like the Miatas, you know? I mean, the Miata is a sports car, but like it's not sporty because of the power it makes. It's sporty because of like the way it feels, the handling, the dynamics. So like you're not going to win any straight line races in either of those cars.
What do people say about the Miata? It's a momentum car.
Yep.
Gotta keep the momentum.
Yep.
They love saying that.
And BRZ is the same thing, man. It is a thing. I mean, in road racing, it is a thing, maintaining speed, but like...
It's just always fun. They always have to...
My truck is the opposite of a momentum vehicle. Like, it's 5,000 pounds, and even with 345 tires square, like, you don't have the corner speed of other vehicles, but with the power and the all-wheel drive, it's like a slingshot between the corners. So it's funny when I'm out on track with other like lighter cars, they'll catch me in the turns, and then on the straights I'm gone. And it's just, you can achieve lap times a lot of different ways.
Kevin at KSR does that, what is it, Chump Car Racing.
Yeah.
And he has a bunch of those Lexus, the SC, those with the 2Js. And those rules are really tight as well. So like, I guess it's like points if you like, every car has like a certain amount of points it can have. And if you add brakes, like you have to like give and take elsewhere.
Power
so, like,
for brakes, for suspension, for tires, for all that.
Yeah, so you have to like kind of really think about how you're going to use your points, I guess. So like he had brakes on the car, but he realized it wasn't worth it. So he put back to factory brakes.
Really?
Just like those little tiny things. But the Chump Car is kind of an interesting one.
And those SCs are basically like a Lexus Supra from what I understand.
Yeah, they have an NA2J in them, so they're super reliable when you're just pushing an NA2J. I mean,
I think like the suspension architecture and all is the same in them too, I think. So
yeah, they've raced. I've been out at Sebring with them racing that before.
Yeah.
And it was pretty crazy because that team is super dialed in. There was a hole in the radiator. Like it got a rock through the radiator, and the driver didn't actually get out of the car, and they swapped it for him. Like that quick. Like within like 5 minutes, it had a new radiator in it. Driver's still strapped in.
I want to do one of those chump races or like the Lemons race. I want to build something for one of those. Like my truck is super fun to race, but it's expensive to go racing in that. Like I'd like to build something honestly a little slower that I can just put a lot of laps in that's reliable.
I will say I think they call it Champ Car now. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
They changed it. They didn't. Chump was too derogatory. I think they changed it to Champ.
Oh, we're politically correct now. Is that what it is? Yeah.
The guys with their beater cars felt that Chump was too.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting.
That's why I like the new Grid Life series they added this year too. The GLTC. It's like the Touring Car Cup, or it might have been last year they added it. But like, we were trying to figure out if we can even build a Frontier to meet that because there's like power to weight rules and all. And I talked to the organizers. They said they have a guy that runs an S10 and he's pretty competitive. So maybe we'll try. But the Frontiers, man, can actually handle really well. And Nissan's like, I guess, Nissan does build a good chassis. Like you can argue their engines are questionable in a lot of applications, but the driveline stuff works and their chassis are good. And apparently whatever engineers designed the suspension stuff for the cars must have worked on the truck stuff too, as far as like the suspension geometry and all, like the IRS that's in my truck. So I'm excited to get more trucks out on track. And, you know, that whole C10 market and, you know, the OBS trucks that guys are doing like pro touring truck stuff with now, like I'm excited to kind of expand that into more than just Chevy trucks because there's a lot of trucks out there. And the more guys that are racing is the more money we all make in this industry. So
yeah, and the Frontiers are cool and they take an LS swap pretty easily. So
and they're cheap. You can buy a 2006, 2007 Frontier right now for like $2,500. They made them from 05 till 21.
And so you can get in early, whereas like you look at the early hard body stuff has now went up in value pretty heavily.
Yep.
You can get in early on a Frontier.
Yep,
cheap.
exactly.
It's a nice budget. And you helped Jeremy on his deal a lot, right? You helped with their kind of...
The Frank truck? Yeah.
His engineering behind that thing.
So Jeremy approached me before I ever even made an all-wheel drive adapter with the idea of making that truck all-wheel drive. And we went back and forth on ideas on how to make it happen. And the first one of those adapters I ever made was the one that's in that truck. And I didn't realize how aggressive Jeremy would be with the stuff he was trying to do with that truck. And it was all unproven combos too. But like I think about how much racing I've done with my truck and my trans setup, and I've never broken the main shaft in the trans. But I guess apparently if you chain a truck on slicks to a telephone pole and try to do all-wheel drive burnouts, the main shaft leaves the chat, you know. But
no one was surprised by that besides Jeremy, actually.
Yeah,
that it broke. He was the only one in that whole group of when that broke.
Yeah,
that was surprised that it broke.
Like I don't know.
I thought he was trying to break it. I saw it. I was like, I thought that was the goal.
Yeah, but then that's kind of a little bit of the difference between like somebody who's doing stuff for YouTube versus somebody who's doing stuff to like for themselves and just go racing. Because like YouTube is like this never-ending raising the bar of wild, crazy. I mean, we've got Cybertrucks on tracks now, and we've got, just all this crazy stuff out there. And it's like, I kind of like the more attainable regular guy stuff. That's why I liked Happel's Sloppy Mechanics for a while there, because he was building like, everyday guys kind of stuff. And the wild stuff is cool for entertainment purposes, but for like a regular guy to try to reach out and do that, it just, I don't know.
Well, Matt has like a chip on his shoulder to prove that you can do things as cheap as humanly possible.
Very true.
Like he has like a complex that he has to do things.
Yeah.
If somebody says it costs $50, he has to do it for $10. Like, I don't know what it is in him, but
it is funny
it's great.
though.
I love it.
I love it too. And it's funny because he came to my shop because he's right in Northeast PA. We're in Southern Jersey, not that far away from each other. And he bought that G35. I don't know if you saw years ago on his channel that he swapped. He came to my shop to buy a kit. And I knew he had like a big reach. I wanted to help him out. He's like, I don't want a discount on anything. He's like, because if your parts suck, I'm going to tell people they suck. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. And I sold him everything. And he had all of his followers like, oh, you've gone to fancy mechanics now. Because like, you buy all the nice parts for the swap. But he loved that car, man.
Yeah, he didn't just weld the engine right directly into the chassis. He actually used a kit.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Got a little sloppy with the exhaust, though, so he had to have something in there.
You use a GTO oil pan? What the heck? Come on.
Talk about rare GTO oil pans. Gosh.
I know. I don't know why people are like, oh, you just swap it with a GTO oil pan. I'm like, there was what, 2,000 GTOs? How many oil pans out there?
Exactly. And like, it's not a great pan.
Yeah.
But...
What about the LS4s? Some people I feel like are messing, like, it's always funny when I see people mess with those.
I'm not going to lie to you. 3 times I bid on auction NSXs with that motor in mind, just to piss off the internet. And I failed.
Yeah.
And now the NSXs have gone way up that they don't even exist anymore. But I wanted to put an LS4 with the, what was it, the Pontiac G6 6-speed manual, the 5-speed bolted to the LS4. Because guys put them in the Fieros. And they used that Pontiac Trans in them. And I was like, if I put that... I even talked to the guys at Texas Speed at PRI. I was like, can we sleeve an LS4 block out to a 427? And have a 427 LS4 and an NSX? And it just...
Because what do they have, like a 4L55 or something like that, weird
transverse 4L. Like, how can we take a 4L60 and make it even worse? Oh, let's make it transverse and make the internals even weaker. There we go.
Because I've always, like front-wheel drive racing is a big thing. There was like 15, 20 grand to win at some of these front-wheel drive races. And I'm like, man, I've never seen anybody try to put an LS front-wheel drive car together.
Didn't, what's his name from the Motor Trend channel, put 2 of them in a car? Tony Angelo?
Yeah. Yep. I feel like he did front and back. Yeah. There's a couple cars that have like that where there's 2 engines in it. There's a guy I've raced in Texas that has a green one.
Really?
He's got a green...
Monte Carlo or Impala?
It's 2 VR, whatever they are, the
4G63
Volkswagen
the
motors.
Volkswagen motors.
Yeah, and they both make 1,800 horsepower each.
What?
And he's got 2 of them, and he has to shift them. He has like a shifter that's bolted together. Like he
They're
clips.
manuals?
Yeah,
Oh
they're
my
both
gosh.
manual, and they both make 1,500 horsepower. It went like 780s.
Oh my gosh.
2
that's
fuel
insane.
tank screens. Like
That's insane.
It's a lot going on. Like he has to do he does a burnout with the front and holding the handbrake, and then he does a burnout with the back holding the handbrake. So I'm like sitting there waiting for him to stage up and everying, like letting him do his burnouts and stuff.
I know what I'm Googling when I leave here right now. That's crazy.
1320 did an awesome coverage on it. He's like a engineer as can be. Like the thing has an IRS 4-link setup now in it, like all kinds of stupid kinds of stuff, like swing arms and 4-link. It's cool to see.
Just drag. You set it up for like half mile or whatever.
Just quarter mile drag racing, 4 slicks all around. And
that's awesome.
It's a fast car. It went like 200 miles an hour. Like it works.
That's crazy.
But it's higher level of engineer than I want to deal with on my race car.
Yeah. You get to a point where it's like, I want to be able to fix this myself still and not have a whole team of support people with me when I want to go racing.
Exactly. And then, having 2 clutches sounds expensive as well. 2
of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you only need 1 backup of each thing because it's the same part on both ends, but still.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's funny, like with the turbos, I run... A lot of times the guys are like, why don't you have the reverse rotation turbo for that symmetric look? And it's like, well, if they're both conventional rotation. I only need one spare.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that looks cool, but like from a racing perspective, you gotta think about stuff, and a lot of guys don't consider that too often. So.
Yeah, I've never really cared that. Like the symmetric is cool, but it's never been something that I'm like, oh, it needs to be symmetrical. Like it'd be so much better if it was symmetrical. I never really thought much about it, and especially because like only so many people carry or make that other one.
Yeah,
it's only the one that's weird.
Yeah,
the one's normal and you can replace easily. Yeah. The one's a weird one.
And the case in point is that 240Z with this GTR motor. We have mirror image turbos on that because it's the look the guy's going for.
Yeah.
And if you're building it for that, absolutely. Like Nelson Racing engines with all like, they're works of art that make like crazy amounts of power.
But also that Nissan is not going to be abused to the level where that turbo is going to be going bad. No. Your truck has a likelihood of a turbo going out.
Yeah. I've killed the turbos twice in it. And it actually, it's funny. I was at SEMA last year racing it and stopped in the Borg Warner booth, and kudos to them, man. They thought the truck was awesome. They actually sponsored me this year with a set of their EFR turbos, the crazy like ball bearing, aluminum center housing, like titanium aluminide wheel. They're like 8 pounds per turbo lighter than the journal bearing stuff that's on there. We haven't put them on the truck yet. That's when we go home from this race. We're tearing it all apart to change the setup before Road America in June. But I'm excited to get them on there. And like, it's kind of weird, like, having never even been on a racetrack in my life before fall of 2021 to now, like having sponsors that think like what you built is cool and want to help you out. Like it's a humbling experience for sure. And it's cool to have like guys like Tick Performance on board and Motorhead Digital and Viking Shocks and all, like these guys. Like you approach Viking Shocks is like, I need coilovers for my Nissan Frontier. And like, they actually took the time to help me spec something out that would work. Whereas like a lot of other companies you would call to be like, you know,
Viking makes good stuff, man. I have 300 passes on their Viking on my Camaro without even doing any valving or anything. Just
well, Chris and his son both run the Optima series. They'll both be at Sebring this weekend too.
Yeah, I've abused those Vikings. Like and I think what people don't realize too is I probably have maybe 20,000 trailer miles.
Yeah.
Which is hard on shocks.
Yep.
Like drag racing, it's just one quick thing.
Yeah.
But then 20,000 miles of it doing this on an open trailer is hard on shit.
Yeah. Actually, Viking says with their high-end shocks that you have to turn the compression and damping all the way down before you transport just to prevent damage.
They always say to do that, and I never do. I'm really bad at it.
I am guilty of the same thing. I don't either.
I'm aware of it.
I'm aware, and if it breaks, I'm buying another shock. But,
exactly. I know that it exists.
So if Chris watches this now, I'm caught. Sorry, man.
I know. I don't even have the Crusaders on my car. They're the entry
Berserkers
level.
Or the Warriors?
They're like their base model ones. They don't have the red eyes still.
Okay.
They're like as simple as can be.
So I had their Warriors when I first built the truck, and like soft springs, rode nice on the street because that's, again, what I built it for. Then I went to the Berserkers, and then they were like, you got to go up to our Crusaders. And, they basically just send the old ones back. We charge you the price difference, which is super helpful for me. That's part of like the sponsorship deal, I don't think a regular guy would get that treatment. Maybe they would, I don't know. But I love them, man. And like, especially for the price, like there are definitely nicer shocks out there. Like you got high-end racing companies that make crazy, but for the everyday guy that's building a street car, track toy, like they're perfect and they hit a price point. And that's why like our lowering kits that we just released for the Frontiers, we worked with Viking and we used their shocks in those kits. So like, I know it works. Viking knows the data now for the motion ratios and damping curves and all that to make the trucks ride nice. So it was worked out to be a good partnership. And I had no idea that I was even going to make lowering kits when I put them on my truck originally. And now,
Yeah, I mean, I bought mine full price. I've never talked to anybody at Viking, and I think they're like $1,000 for all four corners versus like a lot of these drag racers are like $1,000 per shock.
Yep.
So it's pretty budget friendly, you know?
Sure. I mean, that's the same thing with me. When I bought mine originally, I paid full price, and then once I won a couple races, they were like, maybe we should support this guy. But they've been super helpful. They're super nice guys. It's a family-owned business out of Minnesota, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah, they run a bunch of Camaros. I think they've got a second gen, a third gen, a first gen, second gen, third gen, and fifth gen. Yeah.
Skip right over me. I see how that
Yeah,
is.
they did.
Skip right over
They might have a 6th gen too, I'll be honest with you.
the poor 4th gen.
The poor 4th gen.
The poor Catfish.
Yeah.
And they're such a good budget car.
There's a guy who runs Optima in a Catfish Camaro, the Outlaw class. And
They're good cars.
Yeah.
They're surprisingly good, you know?
My roommate in college had one, 99 SS. So
It's a hot rod, man.
Yeah.
Mine was a V6 though, so
was it?
not as cool.
Yeah, it's still 6-cylinder.
Yeah, I know. That's what people are like. People come up to me at the track and they're like, "You should have left the V8 in it." I'm like, "What V8?" Like,
You do realize these came base model too, you know?
like the one Chevy put in it because it didn't have a V8. And I put one in there, but then I also promptly took it out.
Yeah.
it was V8 swapped for 3 months.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, was that the
was
LSA
LSA,
setup
yeah.
out of your 1st gen CTSV, right?
Yeah, and then it had a power glide too. It went 960s, like first pass,
Yeah.
and then didn't make another pass, and then took it out.
Yeah.
I was just like, we didn't even tune on it or anything. It went 960s, and I was like, I think I'm close to the potential. So I was like,
We'll
I'm
try
good.
something new.
I think I'm still like, if like a 6-rib LSA setup, I don't think anybody's even been close to that fast.
Well, no. I mean, my FX would have been the only other one because that's what it was. It was a 6-rib LSA setup, and it went 10.2s or 10.4s.
Yeah, like when
It's
people,
like, yeah.
I did it like once and just never even.
Right, so you had the overdrive crank pulley and the tiny little Olson Raceworks snout conversion. Yep. Yep.
And I just never really even. I probably could have really pushed that farther. I probably could have went like a 40 or a 30.
Yeah.
But I just never really.
Yeah. It's sometimes like chasing the last couple tenths, like it's entertaining for a little while, but then it's just like when you don't have any success, you make changes to your combo and it doesn't improve anything. It's like, okay, you get bored of it, want to try something new.
Eight people in the world care about the 6-rib LSA
Fair
record.
enough. Fair
There's
enough.
8 people
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
So I was just
And
kind
2 of
like,
them are sitting here. So
exactly. So it didn't really have any bearing on anything. I was good. I was content.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I know that it can go fast. I'm good. I drove it to the track, made the pass, drove it home. So it was a satisfying check off the
It's
list.
another one like NALS records are kind of people don't really care about anymore
No.
either. Yeah.
It's not something unless you. It's same with like stick shift. Unless you own a company that builds like manual transmissions, like Tick, Grubworm, those guys, I get chasing it.
Yeah.
But if you don't own the transmission company, it's hard to chase it. Like Texas Speed chasing NA records, I get that.
Yep.
They build the engines. It makes sense.
Yep.
But the average guy doing it is like, it's a punishment.
Yeah,
You know
absolutely.
it's punishment.
Yep. That's what that 300ZX I told you before that we had that went like mid-9s NA. Like that was a 6.2 liter LS3, high compression bottom end, ported head, solid roller cam, like everything we could to get power out of it. And it was like all that to go like 950s, 960s. And like, don't get me wrong, that's fast for an NA car. And every time we made a pass at LS Fest, we'd have somebody come up, how much are you spraying it? Because they all thought it was on nitrous. And it's like, no bottle, no power adders. But it doesn't, people don't care,
Yeah. NA is really cool, but it's a lot cooler is boost.
Yeah.
In any form.
Yep.
Mostly turbos.
I've still yet to own anything with a centrifugal blower. It's on the list.
They make great sounds.
Yeah.
They really do. I like Pro Chargers. I like those guys over there a lot. And they're great for the high-level racing applications, too.
Yeah. The direct drive, crankshaft driven stuff.
It's badass. I talked about putting one on my 240 because I wanted, it's already got the exhaust and everything. So it's like, if I turbo it, then I got to redo the exhaust and everything. So I wanted to put it as high as possible, though. Like really high up
Like
in
out
the
hood.
Yeah. It's got no front end on it right now. So it would
Turn the intake manifold around and put the blower right up top in the middle.
Yep, exactly. And it's already got like a single plane intake, so it wouldn't be like it would just be like an elbow. It wouldn't be like crazy. But that was kind of my thought because burnout contest you still want the loud exhaust. You don't want a turbo really for a burnout. So centrifugal's kind of a good option.
Yeah.
LSAs make a ton of heat. I know centrifugals do too, but LSAs make
it's different.
significant amount of heat. You can't put a big intercooler really on an LSA. You're kind of limited to the brick.
Yep.
The little tiny baby brick. Kind of stuck.
I mean, something like, does Kong put a bigger brick in there?
They do.
They have like a bolt on. It looks like a factory. It uses an LSA lid, right? But like it's a 2650 or something, I think.
Yeah, they even make their own casting blowers. There's like 4 companies that make their own casting LSA blowers right now, which is crazy.
And they just buy the screws from Eaton, I guess, and put them together.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they make their own like everything else. You know, Australian company, then
Magnuson.
Yep.
And, well, they don't make like the LSA replacement though. Like it doesn't look like an LSA blower. I know the Con one. Like if you weren't educated and popped the hood, you would just think it was a stock LSA blower, which is pretty cool. Like for street racing type stuff and all, where you try to win.
It's a pretty
some
cool
money.
deal. Well, man, this was fun. Anything else we need to touch on before we shut this down?
I don't think so, man. I had a great time.
Cool. Thanks for coming on, man. This was fun. Where can they kind of follow you at? Where can they buy your parts at? What can I put in the description?
So LOJ Conversions is just at LOJ Conversions on Instagram, Facebook. It's LOJkits.com or LOJconversions.com. They both get you there.
Cool.
And then if you want to follow the Frontier and the racing, that's at That Crazy Frontier. So I kind of try to keep that a little separate from the business and its own deal. So yeah.
Parts and everything will be in the description, guys. So go check it out. If you're swapping stuff, you should probably be swapping something. But yeah, that'll do it, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yep. Thanks,
We'll see
man.
you guys next time.